Welcome to Pagan Perspective. I'm Tara, your Tuesday subject host, and this week's topic is about what you do when someone finds out that you're pagan and then assumes that you are sexually promiscuous. Okay, so the problem with answering this for me is that it is a majorly a loaded question. And I don't think that this is the fault of the person asking the question, because it's a fabulous question, but I do think that it is the fault of the people doing the assuming, in that there are multiple assumptions going on in this one at the same time. So, big loaded word here, promiscuous. What do you do when someone assumes that you're promiscuous because you're pagan? I think the word promiscuous is a really judgy, problematic word, and I personally wouldn't use it. And it's such a vague word, too, right? I mean, it seems to mean something different to every person. So exactly what it is and when you cross that line is... what? Like, is there some kind of equation that you can enter your details into and find out? You've officially crossed the sexual partner maximum for your age and gender. You are now a disgusting person. I don't know what kind of accent that was, but basically what I'm saying is that promiscuous is a very judgy term, and it carries a whole load of baggage and a whole worldview about sexuality and these kinds of things that I personally do not share. So I wouldn't use that term. I would probably use something like sex positive. So if I'm encountering someone who's assuming that all pagans are promiscuous, my first response isn't going to be, "No, I'm not. You are. You are." Rather, it's likely to be, "What do you mean promiscuous, and why are we using that word? Why not call it sex positive?" See, it changes the whole thing, doesn't it? Because it is a word that carries an entire bias and worldview behind it. Which is my point. It's just the one that happens to be preferable to me, and what can you do? Promiscuity is only really concerning to me when it's done in an environment that is not one of full mutual respect, when the people who are involved in it aren't fully okay with what they're doing on all levels, and when it's not done and engaged in a fully positive way. The other thing that bothers me about this presumption that pagan automatically equals promiscuous is this assumption that pagans all engage in sexuality in the same way and to the same degree and have the same feelings about it, which obviously is not the case. As is often the point on this channel, there are lots of different kinds of pagans, different individuals who are pagan who behave and feel very differently about this topic. There are monogamous pagans and polyamorous pagans and kinky pagans and probably asexual pagans, and to categorize them all under this label of promiscuous is ridiculous for a lot of reasons. In my experience, the position of pagans towards sexuality differs a lot depending on where they're from and to some degree their upbringing. But I don't think there's any denying that there does tend to be a little bit of a sex-positive trend. It also seems true to me that the sex-positive movement and lots of other different groups and movements and communities that are focused on sexuality do tend to have an overlap with the pagan community to some degree or another. I have spent some time around pagans who are clearly trying to create and foster a sex-positive community. I really enjoyed and admired the kind of environment that creates and the attitude towards sexuality that exists within it. I think it's a really noticeable difference and a really positive one. Everything feels different within it. I've especially been fascinated by watching some of the younger members of the pagan communities that I've been a part of. I think it's really interesting how being able to learn about sexuality and explore your sexuality as you get older in that kind of community really changes everything about that experience. It's really amazing how it manages to remove all of that fear and anxiety and judgment and shame and discomfort and lack of knowledge and information that is so prevalent in the way the rest of society deals with this issue in really problematic ways. But within these little communities, everything just feels so safe and fun and open to exploration, and I think that's how it should be. Oftentimes when I'm in these communities, it actually makes me kind of sad that I didn't grow up in an environment like that. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. What I find interesting is that in these environments, it seems like promiscuity doesn't exist. It's not that sexual activity doesn't exist, but the whole entire construct of promiscuity and the negativity and the fear and judgment attached to it just don't exist. This entire system of deciding who's better than who based on what sexual behavior they engage in or don't engage in just completely ceases to be an issue, which is awesome. And some people might hear that and assume that that means that everyone is going off sexually gallivanting with everyone else, throwing morality to the wind without any kinds of limitations or any kind of reason. Hence, you get stereotypes about pagan promiscuity, but that's not really the case, and it's also kind of missing the point. When someone assumes something about you, and they're of the impression that this is a bad thing, or if this is something that they're afraid of, or that they judge you negatively for, and you don't think that it's a bad thing, or it's not something that you're afraid of, or something that you're willing to fully embrace, this puts you in a unique position. You could comfort that person, or make yourself look better in their eyes by asserting the truth, which is that this thing is not true about you. But there's a degree to which that feels kind of complicit to me, where it leaves the very problematic completely unquestioned, where it kind of throws the people who that is true of under the bus in order to make yourself look better in the eyes of this person. I don't think that there's any criteria by which I could be considered promiscuous in the past or currently, and yet I have no desire to defend myself against claims otherwise. It's not something that I feel proud or ashamed of. It's not something that I think is anyone else's business. I have no interest in proving it. I have no interest in convincing someone that it's the case or providing evidence. I'm a person who really, really likes to be understood. I don't like giving people the wrong idea, and I will go out of my way to explain something to someone who has a completely different worldview than I do in a way that will make sense to them. However, there is this one circumstance in which I can get really sarcastic. So honestly, like, what would I do if someone assumed that I was really sexually promiscuous because I'm pagan? I would probably be like, yep, orgies, just orgies night and day, totally my thing. What they don't tell you, really rough in the knees and elbows. What you have to do is you have to get a couple pads, sorts that problem right out, right? Genius. Anyway, I've never actually encountered someone assuming I was promiscuous because I was pagan, but I have encountered this uncertainty or fear or presumption about the degree to which all pagan ritual is just orgies and nakedness. Definitely not something that seems to be like hugely widespread. I'm sure there are pagans out there who have had orgies or do have orgies, and I have no problem with that as long as it's, safe, sane, and consensual. Sometimes you're just sitting there and orgy pops out of nowhere and like, hey, orgy, how you doing? Good. Glad you're having a good time. Okay, it is really late and I'm getting really rambly, so I should probably end this before I start getting tired drunk and start saying really weird and inappropriate things. So, wrapping this up with bondage knots and a pretty bow, pagans, they're a diverse group with many diverse kinds and amounts of sexual behavior, and that's cool. That's for you, random stranger. Promiscuous kisses. Orgies.